Today we're going to go over State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. State and Revolution was written during the lead up to the October Revolution, and from the title you can probably guess that in this Lenin outlines the function of the state and the relationship of the current bourgeois state to the revolution and the state that will exist after the revolution. Some of the terms that you'll want to know are opportunism, social chauvinism, the imperialist war, Philistinism, reactionary, eclecticism, panergic, the lower phase of communism, and the higher phase of communism. So let's dive in. First, opportunism means a betrayal of the working class to the bourgeoisie by rejecting struggle for socialism in favor of short-term gains, by collaborating with the bourgeoisie. To quote, opportunism means sacrificing the permanent and essential interests of the party to the momentary, transient, and minor interests. An example may be giving up on the struggle for socialism to win a wage increase. Social chauvinists are people who use socialism in words but not actions. Lenin here is mostly describing those who say they are socialists but supported their national bourgeoisie in World War I against the other country's workers. How can you be a socialist when you support your bourgeoisie profiting off of the murder of other countries' workers? More recently, it can mean people who say they're socialists but work within bourgeois parties like Bernie Sanders, or who say they want liberation but they hold socially conservative viewpoints, like somebody who claims to be a Marxist but is also a TERF. The imperialist war he is talking about is World War I. Philistinism refers to those who are ignorant and not striving towards understanding, people who don't understand and they don't even try. This is not someone who's new to socialism and doesn't yet have a lot of knowledge, but it's somebody who's willfully ignorant. A reactionary can be seen as a step beyond conservative. While conservatives want to preserve what we have today, reactionaries want to return to the old. While conservatives want to maintain, reactionaries actively want to go back in time. In this sense, most US politicians aren't conservative, but reactionary. Even some moderate lefties like Sanders hold what could be called reactionary views, like wanting to return to a time when unions were more prolific. Eclecticism is taking the nicest sounding ideas from many different schools of thought and creating a mishmash that can't fit well together. Somebody who listens to a little rap, a little metal, a little country, and a little EDM has an eclectic taste in music. And that's nice for taste in music or food or something like that, but it's rarely useful for understanding the world. The Western left is absolutely marred by eclecticism, and it seems like there's more strains of leftists in America than there are actual leftists to begin with. An example is a person who calls himself a Marxist but ignores every word that Marx wrote about any certain topic, like the state, which Lenin specifically refers to in this text. A panegyric is a public speech delivered in praise of somebody, kind of like the opposite of a roast. It's not that important for this text, but it tripped me up a few times because I'd never heard the word before. The first phase, or lower phase of communism, is what we usually call socialism today, the dictatorship of the proletariat before class is abolished. The higher phase of communism, which Lenin talks about, is what we would call communism today, a classless, stateless society. Next, we'll talk about some texts and some people. It's very interesting that Lenin talks a good bit about the origin of family, private property, and the state by Friedrich Engels, because that's not currently one of his most popular works, but Lenin discusses it pretty heavily. I found that text to be a really worthwhile read on how class struggle emerged historically and how it coincided with the emergence of monogamy and the family unit and how it coincided with the rise of slavery. Most of the important other texts that Lenin refers to are some of the most popular writings of Marx and Engels. One person you want to learn about is Plekhanov, who was a Russian Marxist, who Lenin actually admired despite criticism in this book. One of the biggest things to understand about Plekhanov is that he supported the Russian bourgeoisie in World War I and was a proponent of daily, not revolutionary goals. Because of this, Plekhanov can be seen as both a social chauvinist and an opportunist. The other person to know about is Kautsky. Kautsky is really just Lenin's punching bag for much of his career. Kautsky is the ultimate opportunist of the time, even going so far as to describe the state as being a potential organ for the reconciliation of the classes, which is a distortion of Marxism. His willful distortions of Marxism in the Second International earned him Lenin's rage. Somehow, despite being proven theoretically wrong by Lenin, and historically wrong by his impotence to create anything meaningful in Germany, Kautskyism is still widely practiced. Maybe they don't use the name, but people always want to use the state as an organ to reconcile class antagonisms, despite this being proven impossible. So reading State and Revolution and understanding it is really important. It's important because, unfortunately, today the Kautskyite opportunist trend is much stronger in the USA than an understanding that the state cannot be used to reconcile class antagonisms. Also, while social chauvinism has taken new forms and is more complicated today, it is still here and popular. Many US leftists will denounce imperialism, but still refuse to defend socialist states under attack. To fight imperialism, we can't only defend the victims that are pure or perfect enough. Another thing that we can really take away from this is Lenin's description of how Marx studied the Paris Commune. Despite his belief that it wouldn't work, and despite his understanding that it was imperfect and doomed to fail, Marx celebrated the Commune and learned all he could from it. Many today refuse to engage with the history of the USSR or present socialist countries because they are somehow not good enough. But Marx studied the imperfect to improve and refine his own understanding. We need to do the same.